So with that, I want to introduce our speakers today who are going to be talking all about seeds. We have Sasha Hubin and Zari Morehouse, and I will turn the floor over to them. And
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sasha Hubin. I'm here with my co-presenter today, Zari Morehouse, and we are with the NRV Master Gardeners. We are a group of volunteers here in the NRV that work with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. And today we're going to be talking all about seeds. All right. So on the agenda today, I wanted to talk about basic anatomy, botany, and pollination, the importance of good soil, harvesting and viability, seed storage, consideration for seeds, and connecting it all back to why we're all here today with Sustainable Blacksburg. As always, I want to start out with gratitude. Thank you, Sustainable Blacksburg and the library for hosting us today. I'm really happy to be here to talk about seeds. Starting out, we're going to talk about basic botany, anatomy, and pollination. I feel this is important because the more we can understand about plants, the more we can understand about seeds, and the more seeds can come through the seed library. The two main groups of plants we'll be talking about today are gymnosperms and angiosperms. For the purpose of today's presentation, I'm mostly going to be focusing on angiosperms. The gymnosperms, you can think about cones. Just naked seeds, not enclosed seeds. Angiosperms are going to be flowering plants that produce an enclosed seed, which is what we'll be talking about today. Think about your fruits. The fruits are basically the ripened ovaries of containing seeds. This includes many vegetables that we consider, many fruits that we actually consider vegetables. And I thought that was kind of interesting because it's through common nomenclature and a tariff act in 1883 that we actually call these fruits vegetables. So kind of interesting. Talking about flower anatomy here, we need this flower to produce seed. Seed is the product of successful sexual reproduction of plants. And in order to have that, we need all the pieces of this flower. This is a perfect, complete flower. So it has the male parts of the plants and the female parts of the plants. But you can also have plants that have one or the other. So in the case of pistillate plants or staminate plants, you can either lack the female or the male anatomy of a flower, which ultimately won't produce seed. In dioecious plants, there are separate male and female flowers. And in monoecious plants, we have the same plant with male and female flowers. This is important to know about a plant because if your plant is not producing seed, it could be for one of these reasons. Which leads me to talk about pollination, which is how we get seeds from flowers. As I said before, it's sexual plant propagation, and we often need pollinators to carry out pollination. Pollinators are attracted to the colors, patterns, fragrance, or nectar of flowers. Often wind-pollinated plants lack these parts that pollinators are attracted to. In some cases, we have sterile plants, which don't actually provide, well, in some cases don't provide ecological value because they lack nectar that pollinators are required to have. Cross-pollinated plants have a combination of genetics, potentially creating stronger seeds, leading to greater success of those seeds. A greater number of plants in general are cross-pollinated than self-pollinated. And the reason I wanted to talk about cross-pollination versus self-pollination today is the production of hybrid seeds. So when you have a hybrid seed, it's these combination of genetics from different kind of related plants. And when you have a hybrid seed, it's considered not true to seed because of these combination of genetics. In that case, it doesn't necessarily, the plant from that seed isn't necessarily close to either parent plant. So that's something important to keep in mind when you're dealing with hybrid seeds. I wanted to briefly talk about seed anatomy because it can be important for starting seeds, which is not the primary goal of our presentation today. There are three major parts of the seed that I wanted to talk about: the endosperm, which is the food supply for the seedling, the embryo, which is a seedling in an arrested state of development, and the seed coat. The seed coat is what I really wanted to bring up. It's the hard coating around the seed, and it protects the seed from insects, disease, water, and when that seed germinates, it allows water into that. Oh. Testing. Okay, I think we're good. The seed coat may need to be compromised to assist the plant in germination, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Something I'm really passionate about is microbes and microbiology, so I wanted to make a plug for the importance of good soil and how it relates to good seeds. Because when you have better soil, you have better plants, and ultimately, you have better seeds. All plant health starts in the soil. All of these things listed here can lead to problems with seeds. And a lot of this comes from the soil: boron deficiency, magnesium deficiency, potassium deficiencies. In addition to nutrient deficiencies in the soil, disease can also be spread via the soil. So healthy soil can minimize the chance for plant diseases and therefore seed diseases. And we offer the soil testing kits available through the VCE. I have some here on the back table. There's also some at the VCE office that are available to send in to Virginia Tech. It's a $10 fee, but it will assess the nutrients in your soil to hopefully prevent some of these problems. And now's a great time to do soil amendments. So I would definitely recommend a soil kit. With that, I'm going to pass it on to Zari, who's going to talk about harvesting and viability.
Thank you. Let me know if you can hear this okay. All right, so how to get the most from your plants this season? Well, actually, we've already gotten what has happened this season, right? We're looking forward to next season. When to harvest is critically important because as any gardener knows, all of your plants will bloom at different times. So as Sasha noted, we're talking specifically in this talk about angiosperms, and we're going to narrow it down a little bit further. And I'm going to give you some vocabulary here. So we're specifically going to talk about perennial forbs. And what that means is a non-woody perennial plant. So it's a plant that comes up every season and dies back down. There's plenty of other seeds that can be harvested, things like fruits, but then you start getting into like a little bit of alchemy in terms of what you have to do to actually harvest the seed and then pre-treatments following that. So we're going to try and keep it kind of simple today. So plants that bloom in spring set seed more in early to midsummer. So the things you're going to want to collect would be like columbine, bleeding heart, Dutchman's breeches, lyre-leaf sage. Common yarrow, because it's one of those plants that kind of blooms throughout the season, that can kind of be harvested, whenever you're either deadheading or you see that there's a dried seed head on top of the plant. Plants that bloom in summer, then, to complete their natural cycle, you'll be harvesting in fall. So that would be like nodding onion, white snake root, Haropsis, solidago, wild senna. And we have some great examples of some of these up here. And then we can have our panelists kind of explain what we've got, share some of their insights, and do some Q&A at the end. Oh, actually, I wanted to go back. Does anyone know what this plant here is in the left corner? Okay, it's a columbine. And so this is incredibly zoomed in because if anyone's harvested columbine before, you know that those are incredibly small seeds. Okay, so before harvest is just as important as your harvesting practices. you want to make a plan. So if you're harvesting from your own yard, it's a pretty casual situation. But if you're harvesting from a friend's, you definitely want permission, or a neighbor's if they have like a wild field of something. Harvesting on public lands will likely require, and I can almost guarantee will require, permission or a permit from whatever the organization or the agency is. So just be a good steward, like in whichever way you're harvesting. Another rule to that is collect less than 10% of the specific species that has reproduced. And that might be that, you might have two of the same genus, but not the same species. So just be kind of mindful. So for example, and this isn't something we'd necessarily collect, but jewelweed, there is the yellow version and the orange version. Those are in the same genus, but they are a different species. They actually have their own specific epithet. So just something to consider. A primary motivator for collecting less than 10% is to leave that, those seeds for the wildlife, mainly for birds and squirrels, and so that the plant itself can reproduce and grow another population. Another best practice, so have your containers for collection ready, have them labeled, and your containers might be different than where you're actually going to store them. For example, and this isn't native, but if you had one of those giant globe alliums, those huge allium heads, you're not going to stick that, you're not going to cut the dried head of that and get more than one in a paper bag. Like sometimes you need to carry around a bucket and then let it dry out. And then you can like shake the seeds out of that and put it in something smaller. Part of good labeling will include plant name, where it's collected, and the date collected. So again, preparing for harvesting, don't remove your flowers or buds. So as a gardener, you deadhead plants that will bloom again if you keep deadheading, but around the end of the season, you want to stop because the plant will need enough time and energy to push into that flowering state to be successfully pollinated and set seed. So, you could kind of stunt yourself if you keep deadheading too late into the season, as tempting as it is. Harvesting, okay. So once you've got your harvesting receptacles ready, they're all labeled. Again, it's open to interpretation. Dry buckets, paper lunch sacks, shopping bags. It all depends on the size of the seed heads you're collecting, how messy they might be, and how much you plan to collect. You can snip off the dried ripened seed heads or the pods and stick them into a bag. You want to continue to let them dry for 3 days to a week. You can keep checking on them. But once you've detached it from the parent plant, there will be a little bit of moisture still coming out of that. And keep in mind, and Julie has a fantastic example of this, when you're collecting, it'll be staggered. Even if you're collecting from one plant, there might be some dried seed pods and some that aren't yet. So that you might have to stagger your collection over a week or two. All right, testing seed viability. So let's say you have some seeds lying around, you're ready to plant them. Let's say it's next spring, but you're not sure how they did over the winter. You can test them in this neat little wet paper towel trick. So you take your seeds. If you want to calculate an exact percentage, you want to make the math easy on yourself. So maybe you put 10 seeds in a damp paper towel, just damp, lightly moist, not soaking or anything like that. Count them out, your 10 seeds, fold it over, stick it in a Ziploc bag, put it somewhere nice and warm, but not in direct sun, and then watch it. Check it every few days, and then check back on it at the end of a week. Count your seeds, and whichever ones have sprouted, like you see in slide B here, are the ones that are viable. So those ones, you would count and do your math. You'd say 8 out of 10, that's 80%. Question?
You open the bag and add drops of water.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. So yeah, so part of your process checking it every few days is not only to make sure, like, oh, did anything germinate? You get excited about it, but to make sure it doesn't completely dry out. Or conversely, that you maybe didn't accidentally put too much water in the first place. So you might have to, if it's a little soggy, you might like leave it open a crack for part of the day and then close it back up. Great question. Okay, so after harvest, between your harvesting and then your next growing season, there are some what's called pre-treatments that some seeds absolutely have to have. Now, I am a lazy gardener, and so a lot of my collection and harvest propagation will be done to try and mimic the natural cycle that plants would go through, which really just means I'm going to be, sticking it in like a flat and letting it shelter, over winter somewhere that's sheltered from wind, won't get a hard freeze, but still experiences the whole winter cycle and then the spring warm up. That's just me. But there are some seeds that do require this pre-treatment. Scarification, for example, Sasha was talking about the seed coat. So some seeds do require compromising that safe outer layer for water to get in, and so that the embryo itself will warm up and germinate. Cold stratification, like I was saying with winter, sometimes you either have to stick them outside or put them in a bag, like a little Ziploc bag with some sand and a little water, and stick them in your fridge for 30 to 60 days. Polly?
Question, says hot water. How hot?
Ooh, that is dependent on, oh, yes, sorry. So the question from the audience was, for the hot water treatment specifically, how hot? I honestly am less familiar with this practice. Yeah, I hadn't either.
I guess you can go online and get more information.
It's true.
See, but that's
Mhm.
interesting.
It is.
It's not a little easier than going
It's true. And there's tips and tricks too. Like, if you are doing scarification, you might put several seeds on, like in between two bits of sandpaper on a table and just roll your hand over them. So the whole thing kind of goes, you're not individually trying, I don't know if anyone has the time for that. But peas, actually, though, I have heard it's not necessarily hot water, but if you have dried peas and you plan to plant them, you do usually soak them in warm water and let them rest overnight, and then you pull them out and then you can pot them up. So, all right, so seed storage. So safe seed storage, these are the best practices. In a perfect world, your seeds will not contain debris or chaff. They can serve as a medium for disease. If you're holding them over the season and they still have some amount of moisture in there, I said, really let them dry out that 3 days to a week. They could actually compromise the viability of the seeds, or cause premature germination, which means the seed gets a false start, tries to start growing, like if we had a warm spell, and then it gets cold again. So you kind of have to watch out for that kind of thing. Some oxygen is required. So there's a little bit of respiration that happens. But so seeds can't be vacuum sealed, but they can be in a closed container. So, a paper bag or envelope is my preference. Some people use glass jars because there's a bit of air in there. Some people might use a Tupperware or something like that. I personally like things breathable just so that, my margin of error goes down. All right, turn it back over to Sasha.
I wanted to talk briefly about something that's near and dear to my heart too here. Although this could be an entire presentation in itself, I just wanted to talk about seeds to not save, preserving the ecological balance by not planting invasive species. Here you can see a couple at the bottom of the screen. We have Chinese wisteria, we have Bradford Caleriana pear, and honeysuckle, which are abundant in this area. To see the full list of non-native invasive species, you can go to the Blue Ridge Prism website or the Virginia DCR website. A reason I think this is important to talk about is because 49 out of 103 listed invasive species are still available commercially. So people are still out here planting them every season. this is the list that's on the DCR website. You can see here it's labeled by high invasiveness risk, medium, low. But just to kind of put into um, put this into people's awareness that there are many invasive species out there. So if we can try to plant native species instead of invasive species, we can preserve ecological balance, which, like I said, could be an entire presentation in itself. Yes, what is your question?
Those invasive species ever go over into the acceptable list? If so,
Yeah, the question from the audience was, do species on the invasive list ever get moved back into non-invasive labeling? I don't believe that they do. It takes a lot of work to get these plants listed on these invasive species lists, just because they have to be so aggressive. They have to be not native. So it takes a lot of work for these plants to get approved onto these lists. There are other plants out there not on this list that I personally feel should definitely be included, but are not currently. But as we get more information about how these plants spread and what they do in the environment, I'm sure this plant list, the invasive plant list, will continue to grow here in Virginia. This year, I believe they added like 13, they added 13 species onto this list. So as we know more, it will continue to grow. Go for it.
Just jumping in. So usually, yeah, if plants have made this list, they've already kind of shown that there's not the ecological checks and balances here to keep it in its place. So there's a lot of plants, and I'm not going to say like anything that's not native is totally bad, but you know, those things that you can buy at a garden center that are the more common plants, you know, they are still being watched for, you know, in case they become invasive. But if they're not on this list, that means the research known at this time, just means, you know, they're kind of keeping to themselves, they're not overtaking like forest land or wild spaces, you know, they're not out competing or hurting the local environment. So I don't know once they go on the list, they come back off, but it does take a lot to get on that list. So.
Yeah. And if you want to learn more about invasive plants, the Virginia DCR website is a great place to check that out, or the Blue Ridge Prism website. They work hard to try to make laws against planting invasive species and not selling them commercially. They're doing great work out there. And I know that the town of Blacksburg too does invasive plant walks with the town. So that's another fun way to learn about invasive species if you're interested. I wanted to connect our seed presentation today back to sustainability, because that's why we're here, is Sustainable Blacksburg. So I want to talk about why saving seeds is sustainable, establishing local ecotypes, and how it all relates to sustainability. Why save seeds? Viable seeds of local plants will grow future generations adapted to this specific area. So in other words, we're creating local ecotypes of plants here that are adapted to this specific area. When you have that, you have plants that are potentially resistant to diseases that are present in this area. Certain areas have different diseases that thrive, and when you have those established local ecotypes, you can have seeds and potential future generations that are resilient to those diseases. And not only are we talking about disease resilience, but we're also talking about pest resilience. What pests are taking out these plants in certain areas? So when you have these local ecotypes, they're also resilient to the pressure from pests that are specific to here. Additionally, weather hardiness. When you have these local ecotypes, they can be more prone to surviving winter and surviving this crazy weather we have here sometimes. Next, I want to talk about how these plant communities can increase pollinator numbers. when you have these established pollinator gardens or these established areas where pollinators can come to feed off of your plants, ultimately we're going to hopefully then increase those pollinator numbers by increasing their food source, by increasing the plants that they require to feed, the plants they require to reproduce, the plants that they require to complete their life cycles. So, and I know a lot of people are motivated by helping out the pollinators, which I think is great. Another reason to practice saving your seeds is seeds that are traded here locally may not be commercially available. It's and it kind of comes back to the local ecotypes as well, having plants that are specifically designed for this area, but they also just might be rare plants, which is always fun. I really wanted to talk about this last point here. The growth of local plant communities increases human connection within the community. I have really experienced a lot of community connection since I've started the seed library. The seed library here at the Blacksburg Library has only been up and running since June. We started in June, which is crazy, but the amount of support that I've had from community members wanting to donate their seeds and wanting to continue this sustainability movement through seeds has been great. I'm overwhelmed, and it's so great to see the community engagement here in this community. And I know, Zari, you have something to add too.
Yeah, I try to talk about this as often as possible, but since joining Master Gardeners and honestly, like even if you don't join like Master Gardeners exactly, but you volunteer at a garden, there is just such a community of people who are willing to help and share and put you in contact with other people. Like, oh, you would love to meet so and so, or oh, so and so has this thing, maybe you can trade something. And it's really like it's funny because I am a transplant, so I've only been here about a year and a half, but I felt such a great embrace from the community, just being involved. And I think like plants are a great common language for like getting involved and getting engaged. So yeah, that's been my experience.
I definitely agree. Definitely agree.
One question.
Yes, what is your question?
How much are try to support the monarchs? I think a lot of us experiencing tons of cat plants and I know it's been on Master Gardener email list, people looking for milkweed.
Mm-hmm.
I just moved caterpillars to the park garden yesterday from my yard. Is there any attempt to increase the amount of milkweed that's available? It seems that a lot of people are experiencing this problem with more caterpillars and orchids this year.
Yeah, so the question is there anything going on in the town of Blacksburg that can potentially help people with their monarch caterpillar abundance this year? I'm sorry, what did you say?
There's a master garden, a lot of people have to buy. He was telling me that there's some ordinance in the town, maybe in a monarch city or whatever.
A monarch city.
Yeah.
I'm-
They had there were some provisions against growing milkweed because it's like offsetting and
Yeah,
so forth, but I was just wondering.
I-
what we could do to create more spaces in town.
yeah, I would love to know the same information. I can't necessarily speak on any ordinances or anything that I know about specifically. I know we have some town representatives here that maybe can speak about that.
Or do you want to do that at the end?
We could potentially do that at the end because I'm just worried about the people on Zoom not being able to hear the discussion that's happening here. Oh, I think now is a great time to open this up.
I've been asking them how well they can hear, and I haven't heard anything, but
Okay.
they're still there, so I'm sitting there hearing. But I don't know that. I think you can hear that.
Yeah.
There are several other events coming up too that's related that I forgot. So might want to have a few more things at the end.
Yeah. I think we can potentially talk about that during the question and answer session or after the question and answer session. I know that there are town representatives here that could answer your question better than me. Or potentially y'all. Yeah, go for it.
So generally speaking, so again, we have representatives here that can speak to specific programs, but like for home gardeners, one thing that I've been reading a lot about lately is if there are specific populations you're looking to draw into your garden, having an abundance of things instead of scattered planting, yeah, helps make it, I mean, just so much easier to target, right? That's like, if you're cooking a little thing versus a big pot of something, when you walk in the door, you smell the big pot of something, right? So it's easier to locate those in larger swaths. So as a homeowner, you know, if you can plant in a way that is encouraging and inviting, and then again, like through seed sharing and whatnot, if there is a milkweed shortage, that we can kind of rally together. But yeah, we'll let the officials talk about it.
That sounds great. I've seen so many out recently, the monarchs. Lastly, I just wanted to touch on future presentations here. This presentation has specifically been focused on mostly harvesting seeds because we're in the harvesting season. So I wanted something that was relevant to right now. But in the future, I want to talk a little bit more about growing your seeds and being able to produce the next batch of seeds for the next round of seeds that are donated to the library. So we have a winter sowing event that's in the works right now. Nothing's absolute yet, but I just wanted to maybe put it out there is this winter sowing event in January, February. I want to do a hands-on demonstration here about winter sowing, which I think is a great easy way to grow plants for gardeners that are maybe more hands-off or like to make gardening as easy as possible. And then another talk we have, in the works here is plant propagation. The Master Gardeners recently took in the terrace garden here outside. It was started by the Girl Scouts and the Master Gardeners now take care of it. So there's going to be live demonstrations there about plant propagation in March and April. About growing plants from seed, more about growing, I should say, asexual reproduction, other propagation techniques for the future. Here's the references we've used for this PowerPoint, but I also wanted to say all of the seeds that have been coming through the seed library, there is a sheet where the seed library is at the back of the library that's updated with all the seeds that come through the seed library. There's a little link on top of the seed library that will take you right to this document that has seed saving directions for every seed that's come through the seed library. And when more seeds come, that list gets updated. And if you ever find something that's not on that list or that you can't find on the internet, I would encourage you to reach out to the Master Gardeners. We have a great team of really knowledgeable folks who are willing to help out with such questions. And with that, I wanted to talk about the things that we brought in here today and open up the panel, the question and answer panel. Yeah, that'd be great. All right.
Actually, I was also thinking maybe if you stop sharing, maybe we can turn the computer and maybe something mine.
Stop share. Can we?
At the top, you should
Yes.
stop share
So note that what seems to be
and then turn your video on.
and you figure out what school you're done. I saw
Then
that.
I'm thinking and I guess we can't go to parts.
So that's the general answer.
Okay, there's plenty of that.
You guys know the answers. I hope you don't.
I think this is still sharing now.
About the warm water. Yeah. I think that's specifically for these hard, hard seeds, not really.
No, these are the ones that use stratification.
Yeah. Or sorry.
Do we need to make the
hard
thing?
stuff.
No, I think it's okay.
There we go. All right, so I can see all of you now.
Oh, excellent. Perfect. Hi, everybody.
Your home something up.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Do you want to have maybe Julie start with some of the things she brought in?
I can talk briefly about some of the books. So obviously the library is a great place to get books, but we have several that are available here. This one is new, talking about seeds. Its title is Grow Food, Eat Weeds, Save Seeds. I love that. But there's always an abundance of knowledge here at the library about seed saving and plants, etc. So I want to thank the library for presenting this for our discussion today. And with that, I will pass it over to Julia here, who will talk about some of the things that she brought in for the panel.
I just wanted to mention something in general. I have a tall grass seed tray.
There you go.
And it's Carl Foster, so that's actually sterile. So if you try to collect seeds from that, you're not gonna get anything. The reason that it's good is that it's sterile and it is not native, but at least it's not going to be all over the place. I have brought in some sunflowers also because there's no seeds left in them. The birds had taken them, and that makes sure that when you are picking things, you're not just collecting the chaff, which is, you think, oh, there must be seeds. The sunflower is big and it's easy to see, but there's a lot of, if you look at some of the other seeds up here, you see lots of blank areas. Birds have already gotten in and taken a lot of the seeds. Oh, and then some things, I had picked some mint from my garden this morning. It's just not worth collecting seeds from mint. It's just too easy to grab it. It's got roots on it. And
Just to confirm, you're talking about the mountain mint.
well,
right?
no, I do have mountain mint, and even then I wouldn't collect seeds, but I do have regular mint there, and it's just not worth collecting seeds for some things. And it always helps to know what your seed should look like. And some things are just easy to propagate some other way. I actually brought in some turmeric, it's what you would use to cook with in Indian cooking. And again, that's another thing that's just so much easier to divide. Dahlias, if you want the big sort of dinner plate dahlia, I mean, this is not native, but if you collect seeds, you're not probably gonna get the same plant. If you dig it up, you can divide it, and you can actually also propagate that from cuttings. So it just helps to know what you're looking for, before you go out and collect seeds, have a little bit of background information. And then things like marigolds, you may have a hybrid and you may get something totally different.
Yeah, just kidding.
Yes. Yes, sorry.
With the dahlias, they always recommend taking them up and storing them over the winter. But now that our winters are so mild, you can just leave them in the ground and cover them up really nicely. And they'll do okay.
I used to live east of here and I never dug my dahlias up, but we were a bit warmer.
But you do mulch them or protect
Um,
them.
Yes.
And with the Gil garden, the woman who does dahlia there, and she has 14 pieces of newspaper, I did it for her one fall. And then she needs huge amounts of leaf mulch on top. And then they come out those are
I think we're right on the edge of like whether it would be fine with extra protection
Yeah.
or maybe less fine if it's just
Yeah.
left blank,
Picking them up is kind of a hassle, and most of them come
Absolutely.
back. Every time she was that one, but most of them did. So she has very specific directions about dahlias.
You can collect seeds from dahlias, and in fact, you can buy seeds. I have bought seeds from seed catalogs for dahlias. They're so easy to grow like that. You won't necessarily know what you're getting. They'll tell you it's gonna be this type. It could be a variety of colors, you know, and it's sort of like opening up a Christmas present when they bloom. You have no idea, but they're really easy to grow by seed. You don't have to buy tubers.
Because you can get those at Walmart, a little bit expensive.
The tubers are,
Yeah,
Yes.
but you also get a variety, they say it's this that
you're gonna get it.
get, and
Yes.
it's not always that way.
But some of the ones that you grow by seed are hardier, and they'll be smaller flowers, but they're like flatter flowers, so it's easier for bees to get in and pollinate.
Single pet.
Yeah.
Would you like to, you have anything you want to share about what's wrong?
I brought a book. I'll be honest, I've never read this book, but it's called Saving Seeds, The Gardener's Guide to Growing and Storing Vegetable and Flower Seeds by Mark Rogers. It looks like it has a lot of good information, but cannot vouch for that. I brought some puny little dill. I already harvested the seeds before I knew I was going to be doing this presentation, so puny little dill. And I brought some echinacea. Still doing pretty good.
Do the birds go after that and they should get all the seeds?
I've never had that problem. In fact, I've had it last till late spring.
The seeds.
Mhm.
The key to the hill for it.
Yes.
I've got a lot of echinacea that I planted this year, and newer bed that I started. So I've got some that's right up like that. Should I be crushing them and sprinkling them? Should I let them just kind of fall off? I mean, the birds kind of come and the bees and.
So mine don't fall off. If you wanted to just crunch them and sprinkle them,
Yeah.
that's what I would do.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a little.
That would germinate. They will germinate.
It should.
And that's a great way to do it too, because it's very hands-off, and a lot of native seeds are the ones that require cold stratification, because that's what happens in nature. So when you sprinkle them out in the fall, they're going through that natural period of cold that's breaking that dormancy cycle that allows them to germinate then in the spring.
And then with coneflower specifically, you can, because they are so hard and will kind of last on their own, you can, like you were saying, like prick them off and put them in a container. Or I have heard if they're particularly brittle, you can put them in a good Tupperware with like a nice tight lid and shake the living heck out of them. And then you got, it self-separates. You can, yeah, spread where you want them. You had a question?
It seems to me also that some of these seeds that just drop, they also like the sun. They don't want to be buried.
Yes.
They want to be on the surface.
Poppy is a good one for that.
Yeah, columbine is right.
And balloon flowers probably. I can't get rid
You
of
talk about wild sun. We have three huge wild sun plants that we don't in the garden, and every spring, this little seedling, like dozens of seedlings come up. So obviously this sits on the surface of the soil.
You also want to make sure that you don't mulch so well,
Yeah.
because the mulch is gonna kill seedlings as well as the weeds. So if you're looking for self-seeded, and I was sort of a lazy gardener at times, so like I would have nigella and I would just cut it, walk around, oh, I think I need a little here, I think I need a little there, and I would just sprinkle it around. Foxgloves, I could never get them to grow if I planted them, but I could cut off the stem, sprinkle it around, and they did their own thing. It's like, I'd have thousands of little babies, but when I put them in a tray and tried to grow them myself, I had nothing. So sometimes it just works better, because in the fall, it's nice, it's damp, it's cool. They get a good chance to get roots established before they've got the heat of trying to protect their leaves.
I had that same experience with clay onions. They'll come up readily, you know, from the drop seed. Yeah, I think that.
do we have any questions on Zoom?
Yeah.
All right.
Would this be a good moment then to have one of the town of Flex people, sorry, town Blacksburg people come up and talk about the monarch?
We can do that. I think you have some other things to talk about here in
Just
Blacksburg.
few other announcements of events that are going on related, besides the seed library that is here at the Blacksburg Library. There's a seed and plant swap this Saturday. You start dropping off at 1:30 and then the swapping starts at 2. There is we love that you talked about invasives because Sustainable Blacksburg has had a lot of efforts going on. Carol Davis from the town is here. We partner on NRV Tree Rescuers. Our last event was fabulous. Dylan Vines with the town is also here, and he has an event, I guess weather permitting, Saturday morning, invasive removal along the Huckleberry. And I'm sorry, right, Gateway Trail. Sorry about that. Also, there's a lot of Plant Southwest Virginia natives, and Nicole Hirsch is on Zoom too. They're doing a number of things, including invasive removal. They also are doing some seed saving, collecting events coming up. They're also looking for plant pots too, which you can also bring to the plant swap. We try to publicize all of these events in our emails, especially some of our other venues too, but especially in an email that we do once or twice a month. So if you're not on our email list, you can sign up for it. If you all have events, I look for your events to try to share them, but I'm sure I don't always catch everything. So things that you all are doing that you want the community to know about, let us know and we'll try to get the word out. So Carol can also talk to the Monarch City, I think, maybe too. Right. And if you want to talk more about your invasive removal on the gateway, feel free to I have this microphone. Yeah, but do try to stay kind of near the computer too.
Okay, well, here's the part where, are we on or off?
You're off, I think.
Off. How about now? Does that work? Okay. So here's the part where I'm racking my brain because I actually don't remember if we adopted a Monarch City resolution or not. I don't know. I'm looking at you, Ann. I know that it was, you're nodding, Javad. Yeah. So I think this was in a period of time where there was a lot of resolutions coming through council on a lot of different things. So anyway, and since that time, I think what we have done is done some pretty significant expansion of pollinator gardens in the different parks, and we're kind of always eyeballing new areas for that. That said, I think really the primary thing the town could be doing is encouraging people to do that on their private property. The town owns and controls about 10% of the land mass in Blacksburg, and unfortunately, where we see a lot of the milkweed showing up is in the rights of way along the roads. And then those get mowed down at really inopportune times. So it's kind of precisely the worst area for that, for the monarchs to be laying their eggs and for their caterpillars to be hatching. So we would really like to encourage more homeowners to identify a small area of their yard and kind of let it go to milkweed, plant them actively. But once you get that established, boy, you do not need to do much management. It takes care of itself, which is lovely. You don't have to do much coaxing. And I think that's a direction that we would like to go. And I know years ago, and we had partnered with you on getting some packets together with, because that's one of those plants that does require a cold stratification approach. If you have this, the seeds are super easy to collect, but then they require cold stratification. And so we had those little packets with instructions and that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we're working in that direction.
Yeah. I think there was a change in the bee or something too in response to the Monarch City.
That I don't recall actually. Maybe I know that there was an update to our weed ordinance to just change definitions, but I don't believe that it addressed anything about that. But I will, okay, hold on. So this somewhat relates. Several years ago, there was if folks are familiar with like No Mo May. Okay, so there were several citizens that came to my office and said, "Can we establish a No Mo May ordinance?" And I talked to our code enforcement officer and the town attorney, and they said, given like where we are climate wise, we would have lawns this high if it was a No Mo May. A No Mo April is a better solution. But in reality, like it's yes, there is benefit to that, but what is really beneficial is to identify a part of your yard that you don't need it to be on. And where our code enforcement officer, he said, if it looks in any way intentional, you're great. But if it just looks like an unmowed yard, that's where I feel like, particularly if I get complaints from neighbors, but if you wanna just, keep it off of the right of way by, at least a couple of feet and make it look somewhat intentional, that doesn't mean manicured. Intentional doesn't mean it has to be tightly manicured, but looking intentional, that's great. And you won't get in trouble with code enforcement in that regard. All right, now it's really you.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, you kind of mentioned, Carol, doing some pollinator gardens around the town. We're always looking for places, especially in the town parks, that we can expand and establish new pollinator gardens, and creating the habitat for these monarchs and other pollinators in general is really important. Along with that, probably the best thing that we're doing around the town parks is taking out these dense populations of invasive species. We've seen now in several places where we've taken out invasives, and milkweed just comes right up, straight up from the seed bank, or is carried there, or whatever, but it becomes established in a place where otherwise it was just autumn olive or something like that. So there's a huge push in the town right now, and that's kind of one of the main efforts I'm leading is invasive species removal. And so, because we have so many areas that would be great for milkweed that are just all taken over by invasives, especially sort of, as you mentioned, these edges, these wooded edges along, meadows, things like that, where you would normally see it come up. It's all taken over by invasives. So as we remove that stuff, we see the resurgence of a lot of these native plant populations. So, yeah.
Could you name a couple of the invasives you
Yeah, so around the town, I would say probably the biggest one that I deal with is autumn olive. Along with that, we see a lot of privet. There's a couple different species of privet that are very aggressive. Multiflora rose is another pretty big one. The bittersweet, yep. Bittersweet is definitely one that we're actively tackling, and that's the tree rescuers focus specifically on the bittersweet and other vines that are climbing the trees, I guess, English ivy being.
And I would say more recently, Japanese stiltgrass is just running wild. It's kind of like a late comer, and it's taken us a bit back here. We're just tag teaming here. I think Dylan and I have been working closely on the Heritage Park Restoration Project that folks may be aware of. That we got about $250,000 of funding to do a big restoration along Thomas Creek in Heritage Park. And when we first tackled the project, it was like 80% of the problem was the autumn olive. And we took that out, and the bittersweet ran wild. Like it suddenly had open canopy to work with, and it ran wild. And we beat that back into submission, sort of. And then the stiltgrass is running wild. So we're finding we're kind of going down slope from woody to herbaceous, and we're gonna get to the bottom of the pile eventually. But yeah, that's kind of what it's it's dynamic, it's new, there's new stuff coming in. We're changing the space a little bit, right? We're opening up opportunities for seed bank that we didn't really know was there. But we're just gonna keep on it and keep on it. And at the same time, give the native trees, a chance to establish themselves. I also think milkweed is a great choice for some of those areas too, because it doesn't really spread aggressively, but I'll say it holds its own. If you can get it established in those areas, and you're right, we saw milkweed coming into that space pretty quickly. So yeah. Let's turn into our presentation.
Is this a good time to collect seed from milkweed, or is it not quite ready yet?
I think so. That's probably,
Yeah.
maybe the master gardeners might be able to say, but yeah, I'm seeing.
It seems like they're brown, but I don't see them open and spilling all this.
Yeah, if you're planning to harvest milkweed, you don't wanna wait until they split open, because then the seed, like the reason the fluff is in there is so that it's a dispersal. So if there is a sweet spot to collecting it when it's dry and ripened, but before it explodes. So if you can do that and like over a container, pry open and pull out and either rip off the tuft, or if you're not adverse to fire and you're in a safe area, you can actually spread the seed over a sieve and then light it real quick, and it's a flash in the pan, all the chaff comes right off. I learned that in Canton.
Oh,
Yeah, it was really cool.
I've seen the video.
Have you seen it? It's so great, yeah, but
You dry it for a few days and then put it in the refrigerator.
yes, yeah, so it needs the cold stratification.
And
Again,
you want to dry it as well, or that's not necessary?
no, yeah, it should be, by the time you're pulling the pot open, you should, have already waited a couple days after you took it off the plant. And then, your seed should be ready to go.
And that's just a little bit of moistened sand and Ziploc.
That's right.
I was gonna say, I've read that if you kind of push on there's sort of a seam on the pod, if you kind of push on it, and it'll kind of start to open. But that's a good time when it's not too green, but they're drying. If you have any swamp milkweed, I know like my swamp milkweed pods are still very green. But that is a great native plant. I get way more caterpillars. I get 10 caterpillars on that for every one that I see on the common milkweed. And it's a prettier plant too. So now that I've been reminded of seed library too, when I'm collecting some of my seeds, I'm gonna be sure that I put some of those here
And
too.
swamp milkweed's a little bit of a misnomer, right? Because it can be in kind of damper places, but it can survive just as fine in a place you would normally have.
Right, that's a really good point. A lot of mine has seeded itself around my yard, and in fact, some of it in my vegetable garden has got crazy.
How much butterfly? Well. Those, and that's I have the patch that is going to pretty much the point. But
Right.
it likes drier conditions. That's a plus for that.
Right. Yes, somebody's right. They're talking about butterfly weed in the. I never find caterpillars on mine, but there's a little garden in front of the Y thrift store now where we planted some natives, and there's a little butterfly weed there, and there were several caterpillars on there. So this was a great year for monarch caterpillars, at least from what I've seen. In my yard and the Heritage Park, the garden next to the community garden now, it's so many caterpillars.
My neighbor has tons of caterpillars, it's still the babies, the leaves are yellowing, and can they eat the yellow leaves?
I think when they're still yellow, if they haven't completely dried up, they
Well, then you can let it into or the green part of the pods.
right, they will eat pods. I discovered this summer they will eat the flowers too. I've never seen them eating the flowers, but I saw that. I think predators have found fewer of my caterpillars have been returning this year. Anyway, we are a little past our time now, but obviously this was a great discussion. We really appreciate you all being here. We have a little gift, and I'm sorry I didn't know we have so many people, but for our main speaker, these are, we have little tote bags. These were upcycled. These were from a conference these were from a conference in 2020. Hey. Right. Didn't happen, so one of our members figured out that she could put our logo on it. So there. Very cool. So thank you to our speakers and our guests. I don't know if people still have questions.
We're good. Thanks for coming out.
I guess, let's see here.